Ellie Marney, thank you so much for speaking with Lovers YA today about Some Shall Break, the much anticipated sequel to None Shall Sleep. Certainly my most anticipated sequel or most anticipated release of 2023. I finished it in, I think it was 3 nights, and it was only because I was like very, very tired from work. Otherwise, it would have been 1.5.
Yeah.
So I loved it. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about. Oh, you're very welcome. Tell us a little bit about Some Shall Break without. Now, it's always interesting when you're interviewing someone about a sequel because you want them to tell you a little bit about it to kind of get people interested who haven't read it, but you don't want them to give away spoilers.
Yeah, no.
Shall Sleep.
It's a bind. This is what I'm discovering. I mean, look, this isn't the first series that I've written, but I always have the same problem with the second and third books, which is how do you give info without spoiling the first book too much for people who haven't read it yet? So the only way I know how to do this is to sort of say, well, look, the first book was about this. So it was about 2 teenagers who were hired by the FBI to interview teenage serial offenders and how they get drawn into the hunt for a new serial killer. And along the way, they end up being influenced and manipulated by a very manipulative teenage sociopath. And then the second book is once again set in 1982. It's also a serial killer thriller, and it is about the same 2 teenagers who have been brought back to the FBI, who they have to go back again to the same juvenile sociopath for help tracking a murderer who dresses his victims in bridal gowns. So I don't know if that really gives you.
No, I think that's good, but not
it's a bit
too
broad.
Much.
It's a bit broad brush.
Yeah.
So the 2 characters, well, the 2 teenage FBI consultants both have experience with serial killers, and one of them, Emma Lewis, is kind of like a real life final girl. So she's had an experience when she was 16 where she was abducted and held for 3 days in a serial killer's basement, and ended up escaping. That's not a giveaway. That's, what prefaces the beginning of the first book. And in the second book, in Some Shall Break, she has to come back when the FBI feel like they're on the trail of a copycat killer. So similar to the person who abducted her back in, 3 years ago. So it brings up a whole lot of stuff for her. So it's kind of a big journey of recovery, I guess, from trauma in this book.
And so what's really interesting is on the subject of trauma, and I remember you and I spoke about None Shall Sleep when it came out in 2020.
Yeah.
And I said I really liked that you gave Emma the dignity of not actually, exposing her trauma and going to her backstory. And I remember one of the comments that you made to me was that it was something you had to fight for. And something that a comment that you said was, do you really think it's appropriate to be exploring her trauma on the page and to be giving, how much of me talking about what she actually went through would just be salacious details for the sake of the voyeuristic reader. Now, I'm obviously paraphrasing here. You do go into what Emma experienced, but the whole book is crafted around really respecting her trauma in a lot of ways, and how going into and bringing those things up is not just her thinking, wow, that sucked, didn't it? It's really, I mean, that in many ways is to me what the book is crafted around. Okay, you want to know about what happened to her? All right, but we're going to do it properly.
Yeah, like here's what happened. And look, that isn't like dumped on the reader too much either. I've tried to feed that through in little points. So you do get a much stronger idea of what happened to Emma during the course of this story. And you have to find out because they're dealing with someone who's doing things in a similar way to the person who abducted her. But yeah, I wanted to do it properly. So like, yes, this is what she went through, but now, you know, and this is how she's had to deal with it. You know, this is her relationship with her therapist. These are, you know, the coping strategies that she uses to manage the situation that she's in, the feelings that she feels, the moments when she dissociates, you know, and so much of it was about, I just thought it was really important to go over those details and to kind of frame the narrative around Emma's coping strategies and how she's going to have to marshal all her resources now to get through this new situation with this copycat. I also wanted it to be, you know, in a way I've kind of led the reader through that process with Travis as, you know, as an outsider, because he's, you know, although he's kind of emotionally close to Emma, he doesn't really understand what she went through or what she does now to deal with her trauma, her PTSD. So I've kind of foregrounded Travis a bit more in this story as a way to allow the reader to sort of get a bit of an idea of, you know, well, this is what it looks like from the outside. And then discovering along with him all the things that Emma needs to do in daily life to get by.
Yeah. And I think you had a lot more. No, I didn't get time to do a reread of None Shall Sleep, which was to my detriment, because there are a couple of scenes where I was like, yeah, that did happen. Yeah, that was really good. But it did feel like you were doing more alternating perspectives across the chapters. And that was really interesting as well, because we saw Kristen's voice, she's such an interesting character. And speaking of disassociation and speaking of, you know, she's a different kind of example where mental health has been arguably compromised. I'm still not sure about her as a character. I still don't, and I'm hoping that there might be a third book which explores that a little bit.
Well, okay, look, I can tell you right now that I'm writing a third book. I haven't been given the green light yet to keep going with it. My publisher's still making up their mind about whether or not that's something that they'd like to go with. So I guess I'll be hoping that the receipts are good for this book. But yeah, look, Kristen is a fascinating character to me, because I remember when she was in None Shall Sleep, so many people had this reaction to her, like, oh, isn't she's so sweet. She's just like this lovely kind of pixie dream girl type character who just floats along, and she's got some, you know, she's obviously a little bit off because of her relationship with her twin brother, who's a sociopath. And then they were like, oh, you know, well, so she's been affected by that, but, you know, she's obviously the good one, the good twin, and Simon's the bad twin. And then in this book, I got an opportunity to give people a bit of perspective on Kristen's point of view. And I think people might start to realize that actually there's a lot more gray in that than they were maybe thinking there is. Like somebody described them as sun and the moon, you know, whereas I would really describe Simon and Kristen more as like a yin yang symbol, you know. There's like a dot of white in Simon's darkness, and there's a dot of black in Kristen's lightness as well. So yeah, I've tried to kind of weave it together, because they're just such an interesting people to write about, you know, the way they complement each other. And yeah, I wanted to muddy the waters a little.
Well, I know, I think it's a really interesting, and it fits so well with a lot of your themes about it. Trauma isn't just trauma. Like there's essentially underlying pathologies, there's underlying temperaments. It's about how trauma intersects with your personality.
Yeah.
And Kristen and Simon, neither of them are necessarily the most super mentally healthy people to begin with.
No.
And then things, and like I get the impression that I get just from the one snippet that you gave us of like their life a couple of years previously, wasn't necessarily that they were like, oh wow, and then this was a lovely time, and we had our loving parents, and like Kristen's parents popped her in a designer psychiatric institution, but they popped her in there, and she hasn't, as far as we know, seen or heard from them. Like that's, there's something there. So I think I like that, but I like that you don't kind of go, here's some backstory. It's not actually relevant to the plot, but I'm going to give it to you. It's a beautiful balance that you walk there.
I mean, I think Kristen so often retreats into fantasy. That's the nature of her psychopathology, I guess, which is that she kind of drifts off into memories and flashbacks of her old life, which she although it was a nice time for her, I mean, it was very, I think I've tried to make it very clear that actually the Goodmanson twins had a life of extreme privilege that was also characterized by some really shitty parenting, and their parents have basically abandoned them and gone to Europe, when Simon's crimes were revealed. So so I wanted to suggest that there's just a lot under the surface there, under this very glossy surface. And that Kristen's tendency is to remember everything in a kind of a nice way. Because to her, it just feels like a time of freedom when her brother wasn't incarcerated and they were together and, everything felt okay. But yeah, that may not necessarily have been the reality.
Yeah. No, it's she's a really, and it's interesting, and I don't think this is a spoiler to say that you have a lot of sympathy for her.
Yeah,
and then towards the end of the book, you're like, I don't know.
I just had so many people saying to me, oh, she's so sweet and lovely. And I'm like, yes, but she's also grown up with a brother who's a sociopath, and that is going to affect you mentally. And she's definitely not as mentally healthy as people, maybe at the end of Nunch of Sleep probably thought. So and it's not like she's just revealing herself. She's always been like this.
It's this great point about also, like, Kristen idealizes, Kristen sees these like nice ideas, and it's almost like that mirror of like, okay, but if you're like, you the reader are doing this, and in fact that's not true. So I thought, bit clever there, Ellie.
I mean, I try.
So I'm gonna hop back. This is not well-structured interview technique.
That's all right.
So if anyone's watching this for that,
sorry about
that. Because you were saying you haven't been greenlit to write the third sequel, or the third.
Yeah.
What is the name for a third sequel? The third book.
The third book.
Or the second sequel, I suppose. But you are kind of pecking away at it. And I know that at the start of 2022, Summer Shall Break was actually going to come out as a serialized subscription piece of text. And then literally the week it was set to kind of happen, and I know this because I was like, all right, I'm going to get my credit card details ready. You were like, actually, I'm in publishing talks, so hold tight, everyone, which was a source of extreme frustration to me, I must note.
I know. It was terrible. I mean, look, it's just the way publishing is. Although, I mean, the book, I wrote the book and I had just about finished it when None Shall Sleep was going through release period. And then I offered the second book, I offered Some Shall Break to my publisher in the States, and they were like, oh, yeah, probably not, And then, a year after the release, so it actually took ages because it was so None Shall Sleep was 2020. A year later, 2021, at the end of 2021, it came out in paperback, and that was around the time that I was prepping Some Shall Break for a newsletter release. I was going to do it like a serialized, a chapter a month or a chapter every couple of weeks and send it out that way. And I thought, well, at least people can get to read it, and maybe I'll just put it out as an ebook or something at the end. And I was literally like a week away from starting to release chapters when None Shall Sleep hit the New York Times bestseller list. So I was like, oh, this is really nice. That's so nice. I was very excited. And then I contacted my agent to sort of say, oh, this is great. And I was like, and look, this is good news. And also in other good news, I'm about to start releasing the chapters of the second book to my newsletter. And he was like, hold on right there. He was like, how about now we've cracked the New York Times list. I take this proposal back to the publisher and see what they say this time. And so that's what we did. And then it got held up in kind of, development hell, I guess, for a while. It takes a long time for these decisions to be made. And I'm not in any way a part of them. It's all dependent on, numbers and receipts from books and all this other stuff. But yeah, the upshot was I had to go back to my newsletter friends and say, oh, real sorry about this, but it looks like the book's actually coming out as a published book through Little Brown and Allen and Unwin again. So that was okay. I mean, and look, for the third book, I think I'm just basically going to have the same process, which is, I mean, I'm writing the book. I've written the first, third of the book or something. And if I get the go ahead to publish it, I'll publish it that way. But if not, I'll start sending it out as chapters in the way that I'd originally planned with Some Shall Break. But at the moment, it's all once again up in the air. I love publishing; it's great. I mean, it's just.
That's why you do it for the love.
I do it for the love. Yeah, it's a bit like that. But I mean, look, your fortunes can change so quickly. I mean, that was something I did not anticipate, was that the book would hit that None Shall Sleep would hit the NYT list. So that would just, that was just a random bizarre thing that happened. Obviously my publisher didn't anticipate it, or they would have picked up two in advance of the release. But sometimes lightning strikes. You just don't know where it's going to happen.
No, I mean, I'm devastated because I would have liked the book earlier, but I'm happy because I'm also pedantic about having matching sets. So I've got the nice matching covers. So
now
you've swinging roundabout here.
Yep. You've got it in one.
So the two questions that sprang to mind just as you were talking about the process is, first of all, do you know what it was that kind of saw None Shall Sleep? Because obviously the publicity cycle is really the first 6 weeks, maybe the first 3 months of a title's release.
Yeah.
So that's a very long tail to then suddenly hit the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, I'm not surprised. I do think it is a great book, and it's such a compelling read. But also, lovely surprise. And then the second question, follow on from, having had Some Shall Break ready to go, did the book substantially change across the process of, going through the editors and publishers and having everyone get their kind of hands on it?
That's a good question. So I'm going to answer that question first, and then I'll go back to the original one, which is that, yes, I'm really glad that it went through the publishing editorial process, because there were a few things that were changed. The substance of the book didn't really change from the start, but there were a few things that my editor really kind of made me sit down and now what does this actually serve for the plot and for these characters? And so, I think it's always really good to have an outside objective person saying to you, questioning, making you answer those questions, I should say, because if you don't have it clear in your own head how the logic of the story progresses and what you're trying to create on the page, if you don't have it clear, your editor's going to find that out. And, I mean, even some small details that my editor was kind of bugging me on, I was like, well, I don't know. And she was like, well, you have to know. You have to know, even if no one else knows. And then it sort of does make you stand back a little bit from the work and make more considered decisions about what you're including and what you're leaving out. And there's also actually a small chapter that I put in at the last minute, right at the end of the book, which wasn't part of the original story. And it wasn't until my editor and a few other people said, a few other beta readers had said to me, this is just something not quite here. And then, yeah, so, that was like literally in the last few weeks before it went to print.
Amazing.
Yeah. So occasionally I think it's good to go through that process. And as far as how did it hit the list so soon after release, I don't think that's any great surprise, really.
Sorry.
My understanding is that the book when it was released in hardcover, it did respectably. But then when it went into paperback, and in the States, in Australia here, we get paperback straight away. Because that's just a thing that we do here in Australia. We don't get hardcovers, we don't get nice things.
Well, we get the trade paperbacks, which actually they really irritate me because there's all this extra space around the margins and then they don't fit in my shelves. But that's Alice's personal bugbear. But we get trade paperbacks more so than hardbacks, yeah.
Yeah, we do. But in the States, they wait a year before they release the paperback. And like a lot of people have been starting to say in the publishing industry in the US that actually releasing paperbacks and hardcovers simultaneously might be a better strategy going forward in the current economic climate, because they're cheaper and, paperbacks are just more accessible for young people. And if you want young people to buy the books at the bookstore, then, it's just much easier for them to be able to afford a paperback. So the feeling was that it was more accessible. It sold more paperbacks because suddenly the target audience could buy it. So that makes perfect sense. And also a big bookstore chain over in the States, Barnes & Noble, had a promotion on at the same time that it was released in paperback, and it was promoted along with another book by Alex Harrow. So it sort of had a little friend going out into the world, and we kind of bigged each other up. I think Alex Harrow's book bigged up my book more than I bigged up hers. And but either way, that combination of factors, the paperback accessibility and this promotion from Barnes & Noble, managed to edge it over the line. And I think it was also, like I said, it's like lightning striking. You don't know when it's going to happen or where, because it also involves other factors like, maybe not a lot of big releases came out that week, or maybe it was just it was just picking up on some themes that were prevalent at the time in the zeitgeist, in pop culture or whatever. But it was a complete surprise to me. Will Kostakis texted me. I would literally just come out of the doctor's office, and Will texted me and said, "Oh, congratulations, you big New York Times bestselling author." And I was like, "Yeah, that's so funny, Will." And then he was like, "No, seriously." Oh my God, it was a very weird day.
No, but like, I think the other thing is, it is one of those true comments that, like, some people do, are really lucky and do make it big with their first opener. But for other authors, and from a lot of authors who make it, you're on your 6th or your 7th or your 8th or your 9th book. And even the ones that come subsequently may not necessarily be as well received or, have that same level of success, but it gives you at least having one success, like success.
Yeah.
Anything's a success if you manage to put it into the world, right? Like, especially something that is a book, but one that is considered like a big commercial success gives you currency to trade on. But you have to sometimes just and I don't want to say grind because it implies that everything that you write beforehand is like not a labor of love and not something that you enjoy doing or find fulfilling. But you do have to persevere. And it kind of comes back to writing is a job. It is not something that you do for fun if you want to be published, if you want to kind of move through the literary industry.
I think you have to have an idea for yourself when you're first getting into it or first stumbling into it, which is kind of what I did. Eventually you have to sit down and figure out what success looks like for you. You know, like, is it just publishing your first book? Is it hoping for, you know, like, I don't know, you know, for everybody it's different. For some people, just getting published in the first place is a really big deal. For other people, you know, they might want to hit the list or various other, you know, or they might want to make really big sales in some market or whatever. I don't know. Or they might want to get a Netflix show or something. I don't know. Sky's the limit, right? But ultimately, at some point, you have to sit down and think about what it means to you. Like, what does success mean to you? I mean, for me, while making the New York Times list was amazing, and it's, you know, because it is amazing. It's like the Everest. It's like Everest for writers, right? But it's also wasn't something that I'd ever thought of as a achievable goal. So I never really had that on my list of, oh, this is what success looks like, you know? It was kind of like, oh, yeah, that's that thing, you know? It was a bit like saying, oh, I'd like to fly to the moon. Yeah, that sounds great. That's never going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's about honestly making enough sales so that I can help support my family and just getting satisfaction, having creative control over the things that I want to write. I mean, that was one of the good things about this book, you know, which is that, like, I wrote half of it, sent it to the publisher, and they were like, nah, don't think we'll bother with that one. So after that, I was just off the hook, man. I was like, I can just write whatever I want. And so I did, you know, I just wrote the book that pleased me, that the book that I wanted to read. And
you wrote None Shall Sleep on Spec as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I did. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be said for actually writing the book that you want to read, writing the book that you want to write. You can't, it's that whole Stephen King thing of like you write with the door closed. You know, you don't worry about what other people are going to think because, you know, it may not ever happen. It may not ever get published. You know, ultimately, writing a book is a thing that you do because you want to do it. You know, you have to think about that in terms of, so once again, it comes down to what's success. Is it just completing the book and then putting it in a drawer, or is it giving it to friends and family, or is it getting it published? I don't know. For everybody, it's individual, but having that creative control and being able to make decisions that I felt did justice to the characters, you know, like I felt it was really important to me that I got to tell Emma's story in a real way. And if I'd had a lot of interference or input from my publisher while I was in the middle of writing it, I might not have felt free enough to make some of those choices, which I did. So I guess that's what success is for me. I mean, Netflix show would also be great. Well, call me.
Ellie, I'm sorry, you have to finish the third book in the trilogy. Okay. I'm assuming I'm working on the assumption that it's a trilogy. Yeah. Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, I'm assuming it's a trilogy, but you might have like unending books planned.
No, look, I mean, I'd like to say nah. I mean, never say never, but I can't. I am often moving into new ideas and I like to think of new stories. I mean, look, the other thing is I've been working on this series since 2019. You know, I wrote None Shall Sleep in 2019. So it's been nearly 4 years with these characters now. And after a while, you sort of feel like, you know, I'd like to look at something new now. So
leave them, like, don't like meddle with their lives and give them more trauma.
Not too much trauma, just a little bit, just a little bit of trauma.
No, so finish the trilogy, then we'll go to Netflix. Done. We'll go together.
Sorted.
I'll knock down the door for them. I'll be like, make a show of this, but make it good.
Look, I already made merch. Look at this.
Oh my God, I love it.
I know. I just made myself a None Shall Sleep hoodie for Oz Comic Con. And now my son is like, oh, I want one now. So I'm gonna have all these little all my children walking around with these hoodies. So
that's really nice. That's so nice that they're that excited and that supportive. That's wonderful.
It's so cute. It's so cute. But yeah, I'm going to wear my merch hoodie to Oz Comic Con, and you never know, Alice. You never know what'll happen.
I'll keep my fingers crossed. Well, I could talk to you all day, but I realize that I know you've got a whole bunch of stuff on. So thank you so much. I really love None Shall Sleep. I really love Some Shall Break. I'm so excited for whatever the next shall will be.
Yeah.
And congratulations on kind of like, so I think so gracefully also navigating, like, hitting the New York Times bestseller a year after, but also being like, yeah, well, I will publish this book myself. Like, that's the most important thing. That really resonates with me. So
yeah, I'm glad. Oh, thank you. And thank you for talking with me. And I'm really glad you liked the book. Everyone who likes the book, I'm like, that's just a bonus, like that's another thing. It's like, I wrote it for me. If other people love it, then that's just all gravy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.